whether or not it was, anything of that nature. I don't know. He just said he had gone to a re-education camp for 4 years. But he did come out. They did let him go. The same government. It wasn't a new government that overturned Vietnam and all of a sudden all the people in these camps were freed. It was, he was there for 4 years to be reprogrammed, to be re-brainwashed the way they wanted him to be brainwashed, and then they let him go when they felt like he had been brainwashed enough. So this isn't new in Asia, and this is what China's solution is. Now, the estimated number of people in these camps is 1 million people, but nobody really knows how many people are in these camps. That estimated number was based on 2 studies that were done, and they admitted that the studies were really limited. One study, they asked 8 different people in 8 different little communities in the Xinjiang region how many people they thought had been rounded up from their community and put into the camps. Then what they did was they estimated that percentage out, and they found that when they talked to the 8 people from these various different little villages, that it was about 10% of the local Uyghurs were being taken away into these camps. So that's how they come to the 1 million. They then said, okay, well, it must be 10% of all Uyghurs that are going to these camps, even though, the major cities, of course, are different. Smaller towns, people are much more likely to be radicalized than in larger cities. So the math, sure, could it be 10% and could it be 1 million of the Uyghur population? Yeah, it could even be more for all we really know. We don't really know, but it's most likely less than 1 million. That's a very high number when you start to factor in the more metropolitan areas. But that's how they came to the 1 million number. There's about 11 million Uyghurs in the Xinjiang region. The Xinjiang region is not all Uyghur. There's actually a large Han Chinese population there as well. It's majority Uyghur, but only by a little bit. It's maybe 48% Uyghur and like 45% Han Chinese. So it's almost 50-50. But the 11 million Uyghurs, they figure then there's about 1 million, a little over 1 million that are in these camps. But they don't actually know. Now, in looking at all the satellite footage of all the various camps, when they say, oh, we found more camps, we found a camp here, we found a camp there, we found a camp here, you'll notice when you're looking through the footage, and I encourage you to do some of this research yourself if you can, but if you look at all the footage, you'll notice that there's no people in these photographs. They're taking satellite images of empty fields, and then a year later they see multiple buildings pop up and they assume these are camps for Uyghurs. That's a large assumption. Maybe those buildings are for other things, like, I don't know, manufacturing clothing or manufacturing goods, or, we know that China's had a booming economy over the last several years, the last few, maybe even a couple of decades, and that they've got a lot going on, and of course, you need buildings and you need facilities for that. So to automatically deduce that anytime you see a blank space on a satellite map, that suddenly a year later there's a grouping of buildings there, to suddenly think that that's a Uyghur camp, education camp, or concentration camp, or whatever you want to think it is a bit of a stretch. None of the photographs have any people in them that I saw at this point. So our information is very limited. So people are saying that there is a cultural erasing going on, that China's goal is to lock up all these Uyghurs, to essentially commit a cultural genocide on these people, to erase the Uyghurs and their culture. That couldn't be further from the truth. And I'll tell you, the first way you'll know is that China's actually trying to promote tourism in the Xinjiang region. They want you to go visit. They want you to go and see the Xinjiang region because the Uyghur culture is so colorful and beautiful. They've got great food that is very different from the rest of China's food. It has a bit more of that Middle Eastern and Western Asia influence to it. They want you to see the beautiful costumes that the Uyghurs wear. They wear brightly colored dresses. They have a special form of dance. They've got rituals when they eat, and it's all very unique in that region of China. Very unique, very interesting, and China wants you to go see it. So they're not trying to culturally erase the Uyghur culture. What they are erasing is Wahhabi culture. They have banned beards and veils. Beards and veils are not Uyghur culture. Beards and veils are Wahhabi culture. So they don't want to see men with long beards. They don't want to see women covered completely up. They actually ran campaigns for a long time trying to get the women to drop the veils before they made them illegal. They actually tried to convince the women to not wear them. They were running ad campaigns saying, let your beautiful face show, let your hair blow in the wind. You know, they were doing what they could to try to get the women to stop living this more radical version of Islam. And so to say that they're being that the Uyghur culture is being erased is not really true. They are trying to stamp out any sort of visual clue of Wahhabism. Also, during China's one-child policy, so you remember when China made it to where you could only have one kid. Guess who was exempt from that policy? That's right, the Uyghurs. China said everybody can only have one kid except ethnic minorities. Don't worry about it. Have as many as you want. So they let the Uyghurs have more than one child. They were not saying to them, one kid for you and everybody else gets to have as many as they want. That would be trying to eradicate a group of people from your population. Instead, they said, if you're an ethnic minority, a non-Han Chinese ethnic minority, you are exempt from the one-child policy. They've now changed that, of course. They've kind of loosened up the one-child policy. People are now allowed to have more than one kid. And after now it's been, I believe, 20 years or even 30 years of the one-child policy, they recently did change the laws in the Xinjiang region where they said, okay, you can now have almost as many kids as they can have. They're allowing the Han Chinese, because if you're a young mom and you're seeing the Uyghur mom have 3 or 4 kids and you're only allowed to have one, that felt very limiting to the Han Chinese in that region. And so China did change the laws. But the fact that they didn't implement the one-child policy on the Uyghurs tells you right then and there that they were not trying to eradicate this group of people. One thing China recognizes is that part of the radicalization, so what turns a person to become radical? They have this Muslim part of China. They're not trying to stamp out Islam. They have actually a majority Muslim population, the Hui, the Hui Muslim Chinese. That's actually the Muslim majority population in China, and they are not being sent to education camps at this point, although that might change. And the reason why we might see there might be a change in policy with the Hui Muslims, because I just want to share with you a little bit of this article. This is an article that was written by Farah Pandith. Farah Pandith was under the Obama administration, she was essentially the ambassador to Muslim nations and ambassador to Muslim communities, Muslim people, under the Obama administration. And she actually took a trip to China, and she took a trip to China years ago when she was under the Obama administration. And she wanted to go and meet with the Muslim communities inside of China, and she did. And what she said in this article, and I will link it down below for you, is she was shocked by the Saudi Arabia Wahhabi influence that had infiltrated the Hui Muslims. She had noticed that there was a big shiny new mosque that had been built with Saudi Arabia money, and that it was clearly teaching people a more radical version of Islam. She then went down the road and went to a more traditional mosque for the area for those people, went in and saw the women were dressed differently. They were dressed, they weren't as covered as the women in the big shiny Saudi Arabia mosque. And she spoke to those women and she said, what's going on with that mosque down the road? And they said, oh yeah, that's foreign Islam. It's really not good and it's starting to take over. So there is a possibility, and that comes from the mouth of our own Muslim ambassador, U.S. ambassador to Muslim nations. That came from her, where she said she saw it with her own eyes in China that there was an extremism on the rise. in that area. So that's possible. The article is called "Extremism is Riyadh's Top Export." So I will link that down below. It says Saudi Arabia is fighting for a dangerous monopoly on Islamic thought. So China recognizes that, and they say this in